on this computer. I'm going to open. Okay, so now that's open.
Do you mind, like, if you see that the dog is going to bark? Like...
Welcome, everybody. Gonna give it a moment to let folks come on into the cafe. We're expecting a good crowd today. So as you join us, if this is your first time with us, find your menu bar. You'll see that there is a chat box. If you can open that up, select all panels and attendees, and just let us know your name and where you're from. It'd be great to see who is with us today. And of course, I cannot see the chat box right now, so hopefully you all are doing that. Again, we're just gonna give it a moment to let folks come on in, get settled. If you can see the chat box, please tell us who you are, where you're from. We're just gonna get started in a couple of minutes. I wish I could get the chat box open. It's just not opening for me when I'm in slide. So it's nice to see we have about 20 people with us so far. I'm expecting closer to 50, 55 people. So again, we're just gonna give it a minute. I know sometimes it takes a little while to get on in. So as you're joining us, just get a little situated with Zoom if this is your first time. And introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. Yeah, I can't see the chat at the moment, which is bumming me out. Okay, so I just want to continue to welcome everyone. You're just joining us. Continue to introduce yourselves. I'm Lauren Traster. I am the 4-H Teen and Leadership Program Coordinator for the 4-H program, which is part of UVM Extension. As part of my job, I run these science cafes. In non-COVID times, we do science cafes in person, but ever since March, we have been online every week doing some really cool science learning. Today will be no exception. So I do just want to go over a few of our protocols that we have when we are in Zoom. So all of you are muted today, and that is just a feature of how we do these science cafes. In the webinar format that we use, participants cannot be seen and don't have the ability to speak. So the ways that you're gonna communicate with myself or with our presenter, you're gonna use the chat box. The chat box is really just to share your thoughts, respond to something our presenter might ask or say. It really is meant to just stay on the topic. The chat box is not to be used for side chatter and off-topic things. I will be monitoring it, so we really don't want the chat box to be a distraction to others. We really just want it to be a nice supplement to what is being presented today. But if you have a question specifically on our presenter's topic, you're gonna use a different feature, which is the Q&A box. And you'll see that in your menu, that the chat box and the Q&A box are different. Your questions for the presenter will be put into the chat, into the Q&A box. And the cool thing about the Q&A box, if you go in there and you like a question somebody asked, or it was the same question that you were gonna ask, you can click on the thumbs up. And that actually, what it does is, it's called upvoting, and it will move that question up the ranks. So you can see what people ask and decide that you like that question. That's a great way to participate. We ask that everyone just is courteous and respectful today, just making sure you don't create any distractions. We want everybody to have a really good experience, to be able to connect with our presenter today and to learn about COVID-19 and supercomputers. If you need our live stream closed captioning today, you'll see at the bottom of the slide there is a link. I'm going to be popping that into the chat box as soon as I am able to get in there, which will be when I am done speaking. So what I would want to also let you all know, today is the first cafe in our entire summer series. This flyer you can find at the website listed below, and we have a really good lineup of cafes every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So today we start out with fighting COVID-19 with Supercomputers, and then we go every Wednesday until August 12th, and it's a fantastic lineup. So I hope you all will go and register for more of these cafes. We also have a special week-long special series called the Natural Resource Management Academy. We normally do the Natural Resources Management Academy in person at one of the Green Mountain Conservation camps every summer. But obviously, because of COVID-19, we can't do that. The camp is not open this summer, and we're not allowed to be doing in-person programming. So we've moved this opportunity online, and there's a full week of really cool natural resource presentations by experts in the field. And we're going to be providing some at-home activities for those that want to go deeper into certain topics. And then if you come to all 5 days, you can actually earn a Natural Resource Management Academy certificate. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in natural resources, to go check out this opportunity and sign up. Like both of the programs, they are free. So all you're committing to is your time and committing to learning about some cool science. So moving on to today's topic, I want to introduce Professor Yves. I messed this up already. Dubieff. Did I say that right? I practiced with him and I messed it up already, so I apologize. So our topic is fighting COVID-19 with supercomputers. Professor Dubieff, he's an associate professor in the UVM Department of Mechanical Engineering. He holds a PhD in mechanical engineering on the simulation of turbulent flows from the Institut National Polytechnique de Grenoble. Prior to joining UVM, he was a research associate at the Center for Turbulence Research at Stanford University. His expertise is in the study of complex fluid flows ranging from drag-reducing fluids to plasma gases, heating up heat shields of space vehicles upon atmospheric entry. So I would like to welcome our speaker today. I thank you so much for joining us. And anyone who needs the closed captioning, I'm putting the link in the chat box right now. And let's give our attention to our presentation today. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rowan, and thank you all for attending. So I will try to give you an overview of the work that we've been doing regarding COVID-19. This work was started in France, where my family and I were until a few weeks ago during my sabbatical. This is the type of work that needs a team, a really good team. And I have been extremely lucky to have collaborators in France who have been as enthusiastic as I have been, and motivated to really help the medical community. And so my host during my sabbatical was Guillaume Ballarac and Patrick Bégou, but I also could rely on Renaud Mercier, Vincent Moreau, Ghislain Lartigue, Pierre Bernard, and Simon Mendez. All right, so we're going to start with a short video. And for some of you, I know Seinfeld is not the type of show that you watch. It's more the type of show that I have watched. But let's just see what this clip is about. Is the sound on? Yeah.
We can't hear the clip.
Oh. Can you hear the clip now? Okay, all right, so let me just rewind to this.
Did you just double dip that chip? Excuse me? You double dipped the chip. Double dipped? What are you talking about? You dipped the chip, you took a bite, and you dipped again. So that's like putting your whole mouth right in the dip. From now on, when you take a chip, just take one dip and end it. Well, I'm sorry, Timmy, but I don't dip that way. Oh, you don't, huh? No. You dip the way you want to dip. I'll dip the way I want to dip. Give me the chip! Hey.
All right, and so the question is, are you okay with double dipping? You personally. I'm going to give you.
Okay, so we're going to launch a poll and just answer the question, are you okay with double dipping? So put it into the poll if you can see the poll instead of using the chat.
All right, so.
It looks like overwhelmingly people are not okay with it.
Yes. All right. So I think, you know, we can almost, well, I guess actually, let's launch the second question.
Okay, let me get the second poll. So you should see a new poll prior to COVID-19. Were you okay with double dipping? So before COVID came into our lives, were you okay with it?
I still see.
So you guys, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Now the poll's launched.
Yeah.
I had to click a button.
So I guess we see right away that there are a few of you who probably didn't really think about the implication of double dipping, and now, because of this virus, have a different opinion. So there is something very interesting about this clip, and right at the end, we will look back and talk about the whole issue with this clip. So now we can move on from the rest. So Lauren, I still see the.
Yes. So just click the X
okay.
to close it.
Okay, hang on. So same thing. There you go. No. Hang on, I've lost my mouse again. All right. Well, I'm going to. Here we go. I apologize. For some reason, I'm not able to see my mouse. All right, I can deal with that. That's not an issue. So what are we talking about? Well, COVID-19 comes from a virus, and this virus is called SARS-CoV-2. What it is, it's about 100 nanometer diameter virus, and you have a beautiful rendition of this virus at almost the molecular level. And what we know of this virus is that it's present in the saliva, mucus, there is a mistake here, and feces. And what we know also is COVID-19 patients at some point of their disease may harbor millions of virus copies in their saliva, mucus, and feces. So why does that matter to know this? Well, because with regard to saliva and mucus, we don't really see it, but when we breathe, when we talk, when we sneeze and cough, we actually emit a lot of particles that come directly from this, from saliva and mucus. So here is a video of, those are high-speed video of some really small particle of water, droplets, that are emitted during different respiratory action. Those videos are done by Professor Bo Heidi at MIT. She's an expert in airborne transmission disease. This one in particular is a cough. And what she's showing here is really, the extent over which droplets that we produce, again, so like the droplet that you're seeing here are of the order of 10 to 50 micron. You cannot see them. In fact, the only time you can see them really is when it's really cold outside. And living in New England, we all experience that. Now, this is one of our most interesting results. Not that the other are not interesting, but this is a cough, and that video shows that the cough can reach as much as 26 feet. That's a very powerful cough. Most coughs don't reach that far. So, what happened is that our airways are lined up with fluid, saliva or mucus. And that's, as I said, that's where virus copies are. And as we breathe, the airflow breaks this film into filaments, and this filament breaks into droplet. And here you see the action very close to the mouth of the filament being ejected from the mouth and breaking into smaller drop. And the size of the drops can vary from 0.1 micron to 50 to 100 micron. So that process is called atomization. So that's a process that my colleague and I have been very familiar with, especially my colleague in France, because they've been working with Airbus Industries to simulate processes of combustion. And the process of combustion, most of the time, comes from a fluid, kerosene or gasoline, that we have to break up in tiny droplets in order to burn this fluid as efficiently as possible. So here is a simulation of that atomization process. So here we have a jet of kerosene, and there is a cross flow in that direction. And just the action of the air on the jet breaks this jet of fluid into a variety of filament and droplet. So how do we think SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted from person to person? And I say think because there's still much debate, but I think the community is really getting to a consensus on how it is. So somebody infected, somebody sick, is going to sneeze, cough, just talk, or sing, as we've seen with the Washington Choir, emitting droplets. Those droplets are going to reside in the air at mouth-nose level for a while, which means that other individuals around can inhale them, but they're also going to deposit on surfaces. That means that somebody nearby could swipe the surface and get virus on their hand. And then if they put their fingers in their mouth or near their nose, that's how the virus can get into it. There is the whole thing with toilets, but yes, that's true. When you flush the toilets, we're going to have the same process of atomization, and it's going to generate also droplets. And since SARS-CoV-2 is in feces, that's another way probably to get into it. Yes, you will be grossed out by this presentation. So the motivation of our research that started right around the end of March was how far do aerosols and droplets travel? How long do they stay in the air? And how far should a healthcare worker? So you will see that in some of my slides, I refer to the healthcare worker as HW. So how far does the healthcare worker should be from a patient? And that's really the question that motivated our talk, because we were working, and we are still working, with French hospitals on this. So the method of investigation I'm going to talk about it's something called computational fluid dynamics. And again, the acronym here is CFD. And specifically, we are using a subcategory, which is high fidelity simulations, and for which we need supercomputers. Do you want me to, I see a question, Lauren, do you want me to stop?
That's up to you. We can let some build, or you can take this question now.
Okay. Again,
Do you want to take? Okay, so the
I've lost
question.
them. Okay, so actually I have the Q&A. I can leave with the Q&A in front of me.
Okay, so just read the question out so everyone knows what it is.
Yeah, so look, I am not a doctor. I am not an epidemiologist, nor a biologist. I have spent a lot of time, and I'm still spending a lot of time talking to those scientists. My understanding is that, yes, some people are way more vulnerable to COVID-19 than others.
Yves, I'm going to interrupt for a moment. So everyone knows the question is, are some people more vulnerable to COVID if they're younger than 60?
Yeah. And so, we definitely have instances of young adults and even kids who have been sick with COVID-19 and show no sign whatsoever of what we call comorbidity, which means that basically factors that put them at risk, like obesity, smoking, lung disease, and others. So there is a lot we don't know. I mean, it is you know, a little bit unnerving when you talk to you know, renowned biologists and epidemiologists and say, yeah, that virus doesn't really behave the way we are used to. All right, so let me talk quickly. So computational fluid dynamics, there is the word fluid dynamics. So what is fluid dynamics? It's the science that studies fluid flow. And what it is, it's a blend of fairly complex, actually very complex mathematics and physics. In terms of application, in my family, they know that, you know, when they question why I do spend so much time on it, I say everything is fluid. Everything is fluid. It's just a question of time scale. But, you know, for real, some of the applications, and there are many: aerodynamics, combustion, weather forecast, wind, hydro energy, blood flow, and that's only a few applications. So I'm going to quickly talk about the basic principle of fluid dynamics, because without an understanding of the physics, you know, it might be a little hard to understand. So, sorry. Yeah. So the first principle is nothing is lost, nothing is gained, everything transforms. And that's from the French chemist Lavoisier, meaning that matter cannot just magically disappear or appear. That's you know, that's sort of the first principle of everything. The second one comes from Newton. And so any body, and like by body, I mean, it could be water, it could be a solid body, moves when sufficient force is applied. And then there is a last principle, which is energy in is equal to energy out. Very important principle in physics. So I'm going to illustrate that. And those are the equations that we, hang on, did I skip? Yeah, skip a slide. So energy in and energy out, here is like a quick slide. I mean, quick movie. All right, so what happened here? I'm just going to put the credits. It's Jamie and Adam. So what happened here? You know, and in a water balloon fight, if you throw the balloon with little force, it's not going to explode. But if you transmit to the balloon a lot of force, the membrane of the balloon is going to deform beyond what it's capable of sustaining, and it's going to explode. So the energy that you put in throwing the balloon now gets transformed into the breaking of the membrane. That's what we mean by energy in, energy out. So anything that you move gets transformed in terms of energy in one way or another. That could be friction, that could be heat, for instance. So for Newton's law, the older audience here probably knows Newton's second law, which is mass times acceleration equals sum of the forces. All right, so what does it look like for fluid? For fluid, it looks like this. So the strange d is called a partial derivative. It's a difference. And dt is a difference in time. What I call dj or di, that's a difference in space. Those are what we call tensorial notation. Again, it's a very mathematic, that's the type of stuff that you learn in a Master of Science type of thing. But just to give you an idea of what those equations are, let me tell you, when I teach this course of fluid dynamics to my undergrad, third year at the University of Vermont in engineering, and I put this equation on the board, about 90% of the audience is sort of freaking out and thinking that they are regretting their choices. But we spend a lot of time explaining what is the physical meaning between those equations. More importantly, what we do is actually we simplify those equations. This is where we need supercomputers. So here I'm just putting a model of equation. So again, dt phi, it's the variation in time or the difference in time, well, variation in time of that variable phi, and dxf is the variation in space. So what we do is we break the domain into the domain in which we want to solve this equation into small cells. And you see the cells here on the screen. Again, sorry, you see the cell here on the screen. And think about the small dot as probes where we record the information of phi and the information of f. So if it's the fluid velocity, that's just the velocity. If it's the pressure, that's just the pressure. If we know those variables at time t, essentially we can figure out what those variables will be at time t plus delta t. So we have a time step and we have what you call a grid space or grid step. And so what we do, the only thing that you need to remember from this slide is that we take partial differential derivative, again, very complex master's level, and we write them in terms of additions and multiplication. Why? Because computers are really good at doing that. You know, partial derivative, that's something that computers may not be the best. So what does it mean practically? We take a problem. So here we have an individual who is about to cough, and we mesh the domain. So we break down the domain into small entity, and we're going to solve all those fairly ugly equations that I showed in every single cell. This is why we need large computers. And not only that, the cells have to have a size that is smaller than the smallest size of the physics that we want to solve. So for instance, when this person is going to cough, we have a fairly smart algorithm who is going to figure out, I need to have, in this region, I need to have smaller size cell because there is a lot going on and I need to be able to resolve that correctly. So here, this is what basically our code is doing in the background. All right, so what do we use? Well, in my world, we use supercomputers. And so I put a picture of the latest, fastest one. It's called Fugaku. It's at the Riken Research Center in Japan. It has 150,000 CPUs. And they all work together. They are connected by optical fiber, all those CPUs. And what we do, as I say, is that we break down our domain into small entities, and each CPU solve for that small entity. And in order to develop our codes and everything else, we have fairly powerful workstations. So I have one because of confinement, like in my basement. That's the workstation that you see at the bottom, and this one has 16 CPU. So there are two types of computational fluid dynamics. The one we call high fidelity, where we try to solve everything into every single aspect of the physics, every single processes. And that's very expensive. And we generate terabyte and sometimes petabyte worth of data. And there is the more approachable computational fluid dynamics, which is called low fidelity fluid dynamics, where the hard physics, the one that needs a lot of attention, is solved by models. The issue is that those models are really not that accurate. They are the best we have, but are really not good. So for the problem like COVID-19, we really felt that we needed to use our high fidelity software. And so, as I said, the team that we assembled, we have expertise ranging from complex fluids to combustion to hydraulic and everything else. And the code that we have is called YALS2. And that's the only code that Airbus Technology Industries or Safran Group will use for their simulation of combustion. So what does it mean to simulate turbulence? So on the left, what you have are the contours of the velocity, the fluid velocity in a burner in a jet engine. And you can see those contours are very chaotic, look random, and that's a mark of turbulence. So what makes that turbulent? What makes that turbulence are what we call eddies or vortices. If you will, they are mini tornadoes, and you can see them on the right. Those are those small tubes, right? And you can see that they come in all type of shape and sizes, and there are a lot of them. If you want to do a really good job at simulating turbulence, you need to solve them. So that was really important consideration for us, because the aerosol particles that we are interested in, the one that potentially carry viruses, are really small. That means that they are extremely sensitive to turbulence. That means they are really sensitive to those mini tornadoes that exist without us knowing it, but we are surrounded by them. There is turbulence everywhere. So to jump to really the type of simulation that we've done, we've looked at 3 different strategies. Distancing. So again, we are looking at an infected patient and a healthcare worker. And typically a healthcare worker is going to be at 50 centimeters, which is about 1.5 feet. So we were looking to the difference between 1.5 and 3 feet. By the way, in France, physical distancing was 3 feet, not 6 feet. We also look at personal protection equipment. So you will see a simulation where the healthcare worker wears a face shield. And finally, we look at ventilation, where we have a flow in the room and we see the effect of that. This is our protocol. The infected person is going to cough and breathe, cough once and breathe twice. We can reproduce fairly accurately the coughing pattern and the number of particles and the size of those particles that are emitted. And also on the healthcare worker side, the healthcare worker side is also breathing and inhaling. And on every inhalation, we measure the number of aerosol and droplets that are moving through the mouth and the nose. So this is in real time. This is our simulation. I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining what we are seeing. So on the panel on the left here, what you see are aerosols and droplets. So they are colored by their size. When they're black, that means they are really small, about 0.1 micron. Droplets are going to evaporate in the air. So that's why when we start that simulation, we see them in larger size, but very quickly they lose. Here, this is in dry air, so the evaporation is quite fast. They're losing their size quite fast. Also, because our breath is warmer than the surrounding air, they tend to move up. But the coughing, as you can see, goes straight because it's fast enough that it can, it's stronger than gravity. Here, the panel on the right, remember vortices? Well, that's what it is. So we'll see that in slow motion. Here, this is what we use. We look at the the number of droplets that are inhaled by the healthcare worker at 50 centimeters and at 1 meter. So in slow-mo, this is what it gives. So think about those tubes and here as what creates the dispersion of aerosols on the left. So with this, we can be quantified. So out of 1.5 million particles, what we call particles are droplets and aerosol. At 50 centimeters, the healthcare worker has inhaled about 9,000 droplets, about 13,000 aerosols. At 1 meter, it drops considerably. It drops to 250 droplets and about 4,000 aerosols. And you can see the reduction in this. So now, what happened when we wear a face shield? So again, that's the real time. So just, well, by the way, the face shield here, we kept the separation to 50 centimeters. And what we see is that we see a higher reduction than if the healthcare worker was at 1 meter, right? I remember at 1 meter, the healthcare worker inhale about 4,000 aerosol. Here, it's about half of that. So the face shield does work. I have some other issue with the face shield that we may talk about afterwards, but it is a fairly efficient one. So then the last simulation that we've done, and of course I'm going through fairly quickly, but in fact you will see those simulations take quite a bit of time. Here we are looking at wind coming from the infected person toward the healthcare worker. And when we set that up, we really thought, well, that has to be the worst case scenario, right? Because now, we have wind that helps droplets go towards the healthcare worker. But we sort of didn't count on the amount of turbulence or the level of turbulence that a body can create. So here, that simulation, by the way, finished 2 days ago. And unfortunately, the server in France has been in maintenance, which I have not been able to retrieve the full length of the simulation. So what you'll see is that simulation stopped right after the cough at about 3.5 seconds. So this is the simulation with, without wind that we've seen before. And now the simulation with wind. And again, just one cough. So that mess here, that's all the vortices that the body creates because the flow has to go around the body. And now we have all those vortices. And all those vortices have diffused very quickly aerosols. And what we see from that is, I'm going to jump straight to the numbers. We see a vast reduction in the number of aerosols and droplets that the healthcare worker inhale. So without wind, healthcare worker at 1 meter inhaled 250 droplets, 4,000 aerosols. With wind, 19 droplets, 300 aerosols. So ventilation, that's the thing that all of us are convinced in. Ventilation is going to be really key in trying to keep, infection down. So the type of simulation that I've showed you, it's a little bit frustrating for us because here I've showed you as much as 15 seconds worth of simulation, 15 seconds of actual of physical time. But those simulations take a lot longer. So for instance, our most accurate simulation, the one with 2 millimeter resolution, this one took about 35 hours. And so the numbers that you see in red are the number of cells that we use. So 290 million cells, the number of CPUs that are needed to solve this problem, which is 5,000, a little more than 5,000 CPUs. And we count the CPU hours as basically the time needed to compute multiplied by the number of CPUs, right? And that's, so here, for, as I say, 34 hours is only to simulate 3.5 seconds. But that's the price of accuracy. We could try to simulate the same problem on the workstation that I showed you, except that the models are so bad that we will see all the droplets falling to the ground before they hit the healthcare worker. And I know that because I've done it, and because also now we see papers coming out with this type of simulation. And really our concern, and the reason why we rushed into this job, is that we don't want policies and regulation to be informed on bad simulation. And a little bit the issue with computational fluid dynamics, it's also called colorful fluid dynamics for a reason, because we can make really pretty pictures and we can make movies like the one you see. The issue is that if you don't check your simulation, you may be showing something that is not accurate. And in the case of COVID-19, it's really important to be accurate because, well, we want our healthcare worker to stay healthy. We want to reduce the infection rate. And so we want to have the best decision. So to finish on this, and we can go back onto the slide afterwards and look at the videos in more detail if you want me to talk about certain aspect of the physics. But I will ask you this, and there is no poll on this one. But so how about that double dipping? Most of you were obviously not keen with double dipping, probably grossed out by double dipping, rightfully so. But I would argue that Timmy, when he's yelling at George over the dip, is outputting a lot of aerosols and droplets. And that probably falls onto the dip. Now, it's probably less than a big glob of saliva attached to the chip that lands into the dip. But the truth of the matter is that, unfortunately, one thing that we've learned, all of us in the team, my family, watching those videos, is that we breathe a lot of saliva from each other. And that's just the nature of it. So the question with COVID-19 is not, how do we make sure we don't breathe somebody else infected saliva? The question is, how do we make sure we don't breathe too much of it? That's what we are finding. The issue is that as of right now, no one can say for a given patient, this is the critical threshold of virus. So as engineer, what we are thinking of when we think about strategies is it's going to be about reducing the viral load in rooms. I think when we are outside, we are really safe. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't socially distance. It doesn't mean that in crowded area, we shouldn't be wearing a mask, because you still have the risk of a large droplet landing close to your mouth or to your nose and wiping it down. There is still that risk. But what we see overwhelmingly is that confined space are an issue. And so now we are moving into really thinking, okay, so how do we reduce the viral load? And it's a little bit of blind research, because again, we don't know at what level we should achieve for safety. So just to tell you what we're doing, so I'm still working, even though we're back in the US, I'm still working with the hospital in Grenoble, where I was in France, looking at, the hospital is reopening fully. So that means now there are rooms with 2 patients. What happens if one patient has COVID-19? We know that many doctors have been infected during the intubation procedure. And so, that's a simulation that we are setting up, because we want to understand better what's going on in the worst case scenario, and eventually how do we develop procedures that keep the doctor safe, and of course optimization of ventilation and personal protective equipment. So at this point, this was the overview, and I'll be happy to take any question. Remember, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a biologist or microbiologist. I've read a lot, but that doesn't mean that I have any expertise in that. But I'll be happy to talk about how I got to do what I'm doing now, or to some COVID-19.
Great. So before, give everyone a chance to type their questions into the Q&A, I'm going to launch one more poll to just get this information now. So as you guys are thinking about your questions, just quickly take this poll, letting us know so far, rating the cafe, and then also knowledge gained by learning about these simulations that Professor Dubief does with his team. And then once we're done the poll, we'll go into your questions. I did launch the poll, Calvin. So if you don't see it, you could just write in the chat if you want. So it's just a scale of 1 to 5 overall cafe, and then a 1 to 5 knowledge gain. So yeah, if you don't see it, you could just type in the chat if you want. Sometimes people don't see the polls. I don't understand why. And then once you guys have done the poll, I'm going to leave it open just for another 30 seconds. So we'd like as many of you to take it as possible. And then we'll go into the questions that have already been put into the Q&A. And I know one of you already asked a question that I had. So I thank you for the question that I wanted to know. All right, so I'm going to end the poll right now. And let's go into the Q&A. And so, Professor, the first question is ventilation downwind safer than no wind?
Well, yeah, that's what we are basically saw in that in our simulation, because it was a downwind simulation. The wind was flowing from from the infected patient towards the healthcare worker, and we saw the most dramatic reduction in inhaled droplet and aerosols, and that's because the body, generate a lot of turbulence. Basically, the flow has to go around the body, right? And what happened is that creates turbulence. That creates, that's what you can see if you go boating on the lake. You see the wake behind your boat, and you see it's fairly chaotic. You can even see sometimes some fairly large eddies. That's turbulence. So think of it exactly the same way. So so here, yes, ventilation downwind. The safer ventilation will be definitely ventilation blowing into the face of the infected patient and pulling everything back. And in fact, that's in certain hospital room. That's what we have. The ventilation, basically sucks the flow from the patient straight onto the wall to remove any particle that they may breathe out or cough or sneeze.
So can I do a follow-up? Because yeah, I'm curious with ventilation. So sometimes on the news you hear saying, if you have to go back to work in an office or go back to school, you should have your windows open for that yes, ventilation. But what do you do in Vermont when it's the middle of February?
Yes. All right. So, and Lauren, before I answer that question, let me be very, very clear. Ventilation is different than AC. Okay. So one, for instance, there was one instance in a Chinese restaurant where it was pretty much established that the AC was the culprit. And here, AC, because they can be a closed circuit, can just recirculate the same air, and that there was the issue. So ventilation, by the way that Lauren was talking about, opening the windows, yes, it's going to be really challenging when we get to negative temperature in the winter. And I don't really have an answer. I think my hope is that by then we will have a good idea of the critical viral load that we need in a room. Because if we know that, then we can think about strategies of leaving that room for a while, letting the viral load drop either by some type of sterilization processes. And there are many, could be ozone, could be UV, or just opening to the corridor and letting the air flow do its thing. But that's the big issue that we face is like, how are we going to manage the winter?
So the next question is, do masks protect us from all of the particles that could be infected?
No, masks do not protect us, and it depends. Nowadays we have all kinds of masks. We have the N95 mask to the cloth mask, right? So and even an N95 mask, it really depends how long it has been worn, if it has been washed by any way, shape, or form, or anything else. It does not. But what it does, what a mask does, it affects the airflow. It affects the strength or the speed at which the air comes out of our nose and out of our mouth. And so I see there is another question right after, what is the farther a curve can travel? Well, quite far. But if you have a mask, a lot shorter, right? So the mask really, I think the overwhelming consensus in the community is to say masks are good because they affect the very process of diffusion of aerosol and droplets. They don't trap, unfortunately, the virus. For that, you need the full-blown ventilator mask, but they are going to limit the diffusion of the virus spatially in space.
So the next question, if a person has had COVID, do they develop, now remember, Professor said he's not a doctor, but what you might know about this, if a person has had COVID, do they develop immunity, or can human bodies not yet create natural antibodies?
So I think it has been established that patients who have had COVID and survived have developed antibodies. The question that the community is asking now is, are those antibodies strong? And the response right now is extremely mixed on that, because there has been instances of patients who had COVID and got COVID again. So, antibodies, my understanding is that antibodies come in all type of shape. And some individual may develop strong antibodies, some individual may develop weaker form of antibodies that cease to be efficient over time. So we are talking a lot about vaccine. When I ask immunologists about it, they give me an array of response, and they say, well, yeah, we might be able to get a vaccine. Now, it might be one that we have to boost every 3-4 months, for instance. So we don't, like, the answer is like, we really don't know at this point. The issue with the SARS-CoV-2 is that it's a really new disease. We have, we know so little about it.
Yeah. Next question. How far would you have to be from a person to inhale saliva droplets, or to inhale zero saliva droplets?
All right. So I really do not want you to stop social interaction because of my talk, okay? The answer is, it's extremely complex. It depends on the turbulence in your room or outside. It depends on how they breathe. So for instance, to tell you, the average cough speed, it varies linearly with age. The taller you are, the faster you cough, right? So that's, like, that tells you already it depends on the individual. What we've seen, thanks to Professor Boadia at MIT, is that you know, it can go as much as 27 or like close to 30 feet. But again, that's, you know, during the first 5 seconds after the cough. When you are in a confined space, as I say, those small particles are very sensitive to turbulence, to all those small eddies. So they stay suspended in the air for a very long time. And it doesn't matter how far you are, they can travel throughout the room and find you. So the truth of the matter is that throughout your life, you have inhaled many, like probably millions of droplets from perfect strangers. Yeah, there is no. I think the CDC. Well, I haven't been in France where the recommendation was 1 meter or 3 feet. I know that I wish they had adopted the CDC recommendation of to 6 feet. I think 6 feet is a good.
Yeah, it was 6 feet. So have you done a simulation with the wind going the opposite direction?
That simulation is supposed to start as soon as I am done analyzing, you know, the big chunk of data I have not been able to retrieve yet. So we will start that, yes.
So in the future, if more of these viruses start to show up, what should we do to try to not get infected?
Well, that's more like an epidemiologist type of question, quite frankly. Like you know, like the type of work that we do come, you know, like when it's too late, sort of. I mean, well, yes and no. Like it seems that, and you know, I'm speculating a little because again, this is a part I haven't followed that much, but it sounds like a mink factory or mink, yeah, breeding factory was very much involved in the spreading of the virus. So I think we can do a lot of work in those industries where we know viruses exist, and that's where potentially they can jump from animals to human. I think, you know, one thing that we have been talking about and we would love to work on, if possible, would be all those meat plants where we've seen almost like many workers infected. How do you protect them? And so that's what we do. But I think really knowing that this exists and being able to react right away. Look, you can look at it as a live experiment. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot about the efficiency of masks by looking at countries that have different response regarding masks. We're going to learn about the efficiency of lockdown. And hopefully what we learn out of that will help shape a better response next time. But in the meantime, I hope we can continue to do the work that we've been doing and really focus on, you know, those situations where we know the virus took a hold and spread from there.
So I'm going to put the next two questions together, or to have you answer them at the same time. Have you done any research on the difference in the spread of the virus in warm versus cold air? And then is there a difference in the amount of particles you would inhale if you were standing behind a person instead of in front of a person?
So again, it very much depends on the specifics, right? Is there a flow? Is there ventilation? So warm versus cold air, no, we haven't done that yet. It's planned, you know. The one thing about supercomputers is that they are awesome, but you know, typically you're not the only one using them. So we have to share the load. So we have a list of simulation we want to do. We want to do simulation of what happened when the air is really humid. And so cold versus warm. Well, the nice thing about cold is that because what we exhale is warm, it's going to rise much faster. right? So I can already predict that we will have, you know, as far as breathing is concerned, we're going to have a lower viral load at face level, just because it just move up much faster. And with respect to being behind a person or in front of a person, short term, behind a person, great. Long term, it depends on the confinement of the room. If it's a small room, then it's yeah, it's going to be eventually the droplets are just going to be everywhere, anywhere.
So I'm going to combine, there are two questions related to vaccines and medicines. One is, how far do you think we've come to find medicine to cure COVID in the US? And then another question, have scientists come close to a vaccine? So we'll put those two together.
So for the vaccine part, I know as much as the media has shared so far, meaning that there is an Oxford team that has promising result and has moved into a different phase. I don't know much. I know because that actually is something that I have noticed in our meeting, that the first response was to put patient on ventilator. And so that protocol has now been really rethought, and the idea is really to try to maintain the inflammation in patient as low as possible. So to essentially, as soon as there is a hint of COVID, you know, try to make sure that there are no other disease that can make them sick. There is a drug, a steroid that has been shown to have great effect in England. And when I asked my French colleagues, we had just a very short chat, and they agreed that they've been using it with success as well. So in terms, I think right now the good news is that there is a lot better understanding of how to handle this disease. And sort of the question is, you know, I mean, not the question, but the problem is that often patients come to the hospital when they are in really bad shape. At that point, there are not a lot of good answers. Maybe that steroids from England, that's, you know, it seems that it works well. That may be the only thing that I've come across, but again, not a doctor.
And so we have 4 questions left. I'm going to ask everyone, please do not put any more questions in because we're running a little over time. So we'll answer the last 4 questions that are here. The first question, how do negative pressure rooms in hospitals work, if you know this?
Yeah, so they work, so they're designed. So imagine a bed, right? And imagine that you have a vent right behind the head of the bed. And if you have negative pressure there, that means the flow is going to the vent. So the room basically is designed now to create a flow just above the head of the patient, go straight into the vent. And of course, in an hospital room, the air is not just recycled into the room. That would be pointless. The air goes into filters, decontamination, and therefore treat the virus. So the whole idea is that to try to basically trap any type of airborne disease, any type of viral load that gets released in the air, and remove it from the room as quickly as possible.
So, okay, so this question, I don't fully understand it. Maybe you will. Can some types of plants slow the infective period if you were to burn them? Have you heard anything in your research?
No, I don't. And thinking about the physics of it. So the question really is, how do you kill a virus? And that actually is something that I worked a little bit on at the beginning of the pandemic, because I was involved in a project where we would try to recycle masks when we were afraid in France that we didn't have enough masks. You kill a virus, we all know, with soap. Soap is a great way. So how does it work? Well, if you look at, you know, how the virus is, there is a membrane around that virus. You kill a virus if you burst that membrane. If you can crack that membrane, you kill it. So there are chemical agents that are known to just explode the membrane. Once the membrane is open, the RNA is exposed, that's it. It's no longer effective. It cannot dock anywhere, it's dead. So if your plant was to release a chemical agent that would have that effect on the membrane, yes. But I don't know of any.
So and I think this goes to like this discussion of masks and PPE and ventilators, but do doctors get sick while they are handling someone under, you know, that has COVID?
Yeah, I think the number right now is 600 healthcare workers in the US have lost their lives to COVID, and countless more have been sick with COVID. I think it is extremely hard when we are in an ICU that potentially is overwhelmed with COVID patients to keep everything clean. There is some uncertainty of how long really you should be wearing some of those masks. And remember that in many places, there were not enough PPEs. And so those healthcare workers had to wear their mask for much longer than recommended. A surgical mask should be worn, I think, if I remember correctly, for no more than an hour or two. And here we heard stories after stories of healthcare workers who basically were reusing the same mask day after day. So yes, definitely many have come down. And in fact, we read in the media of the stress that they've been under and they're still under.
So I saved this question for last because I'm going to expand on it. Calvin wants to know where do you work? And I'm going to expand on that. Not only where do you work, but for those that are here today who might be interested in having a career like yours, what's the pathway you take to become you?
So Calvin, I work at the University of Vermont. In most academic institutions, every 6 years or so, you are allowed to take a sabbatical to boost up your research and create more opportunities. I took mine to go back to where I did my PhD back in France, because it's a team that I've been working with for a long time. So really last year I've been working at two institutions, University of Vermont and the lab in France. So in terms of my path, I went to engineering school, mechanical engineering school in France. Then from there, I went on to study, to do a PhD in fluid mechanics. So that's pretty much the path. So we're talking about 8 years of education after high school. So for those of you who want to become engineer or biologists or go into science, what I've showed you in terms of simulation is now basically getting into almost any field of science. Because computers, when used carefully, can really inform us on many interesting things. And for instance, I can tell you that nowadays planes are designed and tested on computers. And a lot of the kinks are worked out on computers using simulations similar to the ones I've shown you. And then a couple of prototypes are built to validate those simulations. Biologists more and more are using simulation like I mean, at the level that you see on the screen, at the atomistic level, to understand better what's going on. Yeah, what makes a virus potent, or you know, how do you kill a virus? And so, you know, I'm saying this because we see now a shift, and also there is the whole big data that, you know, that we see in epidemiology and everything else. And so, you know, one of the big aspects of my education was it was computer heavy, and we see that across the board. So any of you are interested in science, you know, whether it's Minecraft or anything else, I strongly encourage you to get into programming, because the truth of the matter is that you'll be doing programming regardless of where you are.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, sharing your expertise with everyone who's joined us today. I know I learned a lot, and I really appreciate you sharing this with us. So everyone who's still with us, let's give a shout out, and hope I'll see you all again next week. Same time, just register. It's going to be on protein modification related to cell division. So it should be another really good topic. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day, and thanks for joining in. Bye.
Thank you so much.